And I'm very happy to open our afternoon session with the future. So please welcome our students from New York University of Florence.
Ciao, hello, ni hao, etesen, hola, assalamu alaikum. We would like to greet you not only as students studying at NYU Florence, but also as global citizens. Collectively, between the four of us, we have lived in Ghana, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, Spain, Peru, Abu Dhabi, Britain, the United States, and now Italy. New York University is a global university with 3 main campuses in New York, Shanghai, and Abu Dhabi, and 14 other study abroad sites. The different paths we have taken in our lives have led us all here today. Our time at NYU Florence and the opportunity to speak to you today has helped us deepen our understanding of the impact that a global education has had on us. We believe cultural diversity is imperative for resilience in our contemporary world. My name is Victoria Cece. I am 20 years old, and I am a junior at New York University studying in the Global Liberal Studies program with a concentration in law, ethics, and religion. My course of studies is one of the best choices I have made so far in my life today. It led me to the opportunity to speak to you all in this room. I am grateful to pursue an education that reflects the globalization of our world. I do not come from a particularly culturally diverse home. My father is an Italian American, and my mother is a mixture of heritages, growing up in the Washington, D.C. area. My family represents the undeniable cultural diversity that comprises America. Yet, this did not bar me from connecting and comprehending more easily defined cultural identities. My high school consisted of a myriad of cultures. 40% of its student population was comprised of South Koreans. Evidently, I experienced a microcosm of South Korea from roughly 11,000 kilometers away. Many I know, however, found the expression of a foreign culture outside of its original geographical borders as something resistant to assimilation. Seeing groups of Koreans hanging out together, speaking Korean, discussing a Korean television program can be off-putting to some. As humans, we thrive off of having a sense of our identity. This begins from a young age with the notion of trust. We found trust in ourselves as we started to taste independence, learning to walk, learning how to feed ourselves. This progresses as we know that life carries on. When we learn to walk, we also began to trust someone else for the first time, our parents, our guardians with their benevolent encouragements. As we move through life, we interact with those around us, searching for trustworthiness unconsciously. We continue on the journey of constructing a community, whether in one specific neighborhood or over multiple borders, based off of who we placed a piece of our confidence in. This exploration of trust leads to inevitable mental struggles, frustrations, and traumas, which all shake up the perception of who you are and what you are doing in this world, and what your relationship is to those around you. These are only amplified when one attempts to absorb themselves into a community that is comprehensively diverse from anything they have ever known. When I entered my first year of college at New York University, I was excited to change scenery. However, the adjustment to a life in Manhattan began to seem almost impossible. Anxiety construed my reality. I lost control of carrying out everyday activities. I stopped eating. For the first time, I confronted exclusion based on partiality. Stares flooded every street I confronted. I felt naked to the world, judged before being asked what my name was. I deprived myself to conform to an imagined ideal. I was embarrassed. I fell victim to a mental disorder that could not be healed without patient individuals supporting me as I crawled out of the protective shell I ruthlessly constructed. Leaving college for treatment 1,000 miles away from home only instigated further anger and resentment. Slowly, though, I began to feel the power that even the smallest camaraderie has on the mental strength of the individual. Each woman I encountered there held impressively intelligent insight and startling individual histories. Together, we sought out the inner voice and power within each other every single day. We never gave up on each other because we all knew that, beyond these bleak circumstances, that there is a future. There is an inner harmony that for me plays somewhat like Chopin's Fantasy Impromptu in C-sharp minor. In the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, one of the most authoritative dictionaries of the English language in the United States, community is defined as a unified body of individuals with common interests living in a particular area, broadly, the area itself. In such a tumultuous, fast-paced world, we must acknowledge that this definition of community never changed. We all still share common interests among each other. These are not bound by race, gender, or origin. The community remains a vital tool of support, relying on a thorough language of trust. The effort to adapt to a brand new environment is not a simple task. Some of my South Korean friends were living with one parent, while the others still remained working in South Korea. Many were working effortlessly towards achieving citizenship while still studying at school for their exams. The refugee crisis is only a much larger example of this, where many escape insufferable conditions. Yet, a simple relocation does not instantly change who these individuals are. They are all enduring volatile mental strife while still trying to find peace in their new surroundings. They are all looking to reassemble their lives in a new neighborhood. Of course, we cannot deny that our dynamic world presents challenges to what it means to be a member of today's community. As a student and member of our global community, I believe that together we can only use individual diversity as a tool to empower every one of our local communities.
Hi, my name is Antonio Kieschnick, and I am a freshman at NYU Florence. I'm 18 years old. Each person, I believe, is shaped by those around them and the interactions we have with each other. In my case, the people who have shaped who I am come from all over the world. In part, this is because I was born in Taiwan to a Spanish mother and American father and spent my first 8 years there studying at the local primary school in Chinese. Then I finished the rest of my public education in Britain, Spain, and the United States, and am now starting college here at NYU Florence. In a sense, telling people about who I am and what my story is means telling them about the individuals I have met in my life. It means telling them about the wasi, or gas man in Taipei, who used to bring the gas for our apartment in once a week, because in that part of Taipei, there was no gas main, so we needed gas canisters. When he walked through that door with the gas canister over his shoulder, I would roll up my parents' yoga mat and lift it onto my shoulder and imitate his every move as he worked. Or Cui Xiansheng, Mr. Cui, who was our landlord. He lived upstairs, and when the typhoon hit in 2001 and the local water pump broke, he was the guy who went up to the mountains and brought back water for the next few days. There's my lengua y cultura, or language and culture teacher in Spain, Mr. Edu. I remember when there was a teacher's strike, and he explained to us that while he was well paid, he was still striking in solidarity with the countless underpaid teachers around the country. I could go on and on about all these different people I've had the privilege of meeting in my life, but the point is that despite having all these interactions, I have never met the same person twice. And it's not just that each person has their own unique qualities, it is that these people are, at their very core, extraordinary individuals. They treated me with such decency, with such kindness, even when it was not in any way their call of duty. The Wasa man in Taipei didn't have to have a smile ready for me every time I came to greet him at the door, but he did, and I still remember his smile. And that, I believe, is the effect these different individuals had on me growing up. As I met all these people, I realized they all had one major quality in common: their kindness. And I began to understand that warmth and goodness are not attributes restricted to one culture, but are rather universal qualities everybody is born with. That was what diversity did for me. And I learned it from the people around me, from the unique interactions I had with people around the world. In learning to appreciate individuality, that is where any sense of diversity comes from. And I think that that's something that is accessible in any city. I mean, look, we're in Florence, a city where even the architecture carries a heavy Arab influence, where the Dome of Sultaniyya in Iran influenced the design of the Duomo here in Florence. And nowadays, you can find everything from Chinese contemporary art to students from around the world at the University of Florence. All these different influences have the potential to create something beautiful now and to influence the worldviews of future generations. So it is important that they get to interact with one another. Of course, there are definite cultural barriers, but they're not there to be seen as limits or boundaries to be upheld, rather as obstacles to be overcome. I understand that a city cannot solve all of the problems posed by these cultural differences, but it can create situations where individuals learn to be resilient in the face of these obstacles and can learn to bounce back from their difficulties in the attempts they make to communicate with one another. If my own experiences and the beauty around this town are anything to go by, it is that people have a natural brilliance to them, and the more they talk with one another, the brighter they'll shine. Thank you very much.
Ciao. My name is Nanakusia Adu Apraku. I am a 20-year-old business student from NYU, studying currently at NYU Florence. I'm originally from the Bronx, New York, a predominantly African American and Latino community on the outskirts of Manhattan. And my parents hail from Ghana, West Africa. Before my father turned 5, both of his parents were dead. He grew up homeless with no guidance, forced to pave his own way in life. His story inspires me every day to forge my own path, unafraid to be first, to be new, or to be unique. But my uniqueness wasn't always accepted. I recall when I went shopping at a thrift store and experienced racial profiling for the first time. My friends and I walked into the store, and a woman immediately began following us around, even after we surrendered our bags in accordance with their store policy. My friends and I walked into the store, and not soon after I picked up my first item, a woman pointed at me, calling me a thief. I attempted to explain to her and her manager that I had never been in their store before, but they were insistent that they saw me just last week stealing from them. I stood there in disbelief. How dare they humiliate and belittle me because the color of my skin? I was infuriated, and I yelled at him, tears threatening to fall from my eyes at the unfairness of it all. I remember looking at the sign behind him titled USA Thrift, plastered to the wall in the colors red, white, and blue. As a child, I was sold the American dream. I stood with my peers to face the American flag, and with our hands over our heart, we recited a national anthem that finished with the promised liberty and justice for all. But that day in the thrift store, I was disappointed. My belief in the American dream diminished, and my perception of equality shattered. I had become a blank wall on which people projected their own stereotypes of who I was, ignorant to the real me. As a Black girl, I was defined by people's perceptions, even if I did not see those stereotypes within myself. As a Black girl, I remained powerless and unseen. I left his store, sat on the pavement outside, and cried into my arms. Growing up in New York City played a key role in the formation of my identity. As an adolescent, I loved Latin dancing and watching Korean dramas. I never thought I would fear diversity, but then I came to understand that diversity did scare me. I was scared to be thrust into an entirely new world that I could not relate to. It all began the very first time I left my little bubble of the Bronx. I attended my very first Youth in Government conference that brought together high school students from all over New York State to debate the pressing political issues of our country. On our journey by bus, we saw our broken city of the Bronx transform into landscape gardens and beautiful views. We didn't hear dirty buses or see smog. We heard the chirping of free birds breathing clean air. The sky was clear of gloomy clouds, and the trees were tall and didn't look planted just for show. We arrived at the hotel, and I had never seen a place so fancy, coming from the Bronx. As we walked into the reception, we heard the laughter of tall blondes and their clicking heels. I was intimidated to speak in front of all these people who were nothing like me. My group was the only all-Black female group, a fact accentuated by the lack of Black women in the room. We stood up to present, but when the time for opposing arguments arrived, no one agreed with our ideas. The only thing that could redeem us was our closing statement, which I was set to deliver. I spoke for as long as I could, as hard as I could, and at the end of it all, I was surprised to hear something: applause. Not only was it a rare occurrence, but it was also against house rules. The once hostile crowd smiled at me as I walked back to my seat, another uncommon gesture that gave me confidence and a glimmer of hope. I perceived these gestures as a warm welcome into their world, and I readily accepted it. I spoke the entire conference, and when I won the Best Debater Award at the end, it validated that my voice had purpose. I had made an impact. Maybe they had come to understand a little better the short girl from the Bronx, just as I had come to understand their small encouragements. The bus ride home felt fleeting, and as we stopped, I noticed a small bird take to the sky, soaring without a care. It maneuvered cleanly through the buildings and above all the smog. It was determined to fly away, and it was at that very moment when I decided that education shall be the air beneath my wings. As I grew older, I came to understand that being black meant to be judged, that even when I tried to be different, I could not defeat the stereotypes in the minds of other people. You feel invisible, so it is so easy to turn to ignorance, guns, drugs, and gangs for protection, to provide a buffer from the psychological ails that surround you and calm the mental insanity that creeps from living in a society where your identity on so many levels is deemed worthless. Some black youths create a subculture where they can affirm all the things they're denied in general society. This thirst for power and respect is partly a reaction to and an internalization of the emotional and physical violence they experience at the hands of white supremacy. Those who seek to overcome must be resilient in order to prosper, myself included. And it is for this reason that today's topics of resilience and identity resonate with me so deeply. Thank you.
Buongiorno. Introductions are always an interesting experience for me. Simple questions can have complicated answers. We often start with learning someone's name. So allow me to introduce myself as Harshini Karunaratne. What do I study? Film and New Media and Theater at New York University, Abu Dhabi. This response often raised some eyebrows as surprise. And I stand before you today as a 20-year-old student. Now for the most difficult question. Where are you from? 4 simple words, but I hesitate in trying to decide my response. My most honest answer, presently, is that I am Sri Lankan Peruvian, but I was born and raised in Sri Lanka. I say presently because I've learned that identity can change over time. I grew up wholeheartedly identifying as Sri Lankan. I went to a local school, I speak the language, I spent 17 years of my life in the country I was born in. And yet growing up, and to this day, I'm constantly asked questions about where I'm really from because I don't match the stereotype of what a Sri Lankan should look or sound like. Here's the problem. Identity is seen as a what, but it's complex. It exists within, and it's something that I cannot hold in my hand. In a country like Sri Lanka, which had faced civil war for 27 years, a country which is home to people of different ethnicities and religions, there is somehow a need to create a kind of boundary. That is to say, if someone doesn't fit your conception or doesn't match certain stereotypes, they are seen as an unwelcome outsider. Foreign, strange, they threaten a sense of communal identity. In Sri Lanka, one can spend their entire secondary and primary education learning only about their own country. Without the possibility of learning about other cultures, there develops this need to categorize and separate between us and the others. I went from a local school to the only truly international school in my country. The international education I received from my high school totally shaped me as a person. I got to share a classroom with students from diverse countries with different religious ideals. Classroom discussion was never about someone being right or wrong, but about being able to listen to the many opinions and perceptions we each had about a topic of interest. I was thankful then to be accepted to NYU Abu Dhabi. Here is a university with students from all corners of the world. My closest friends are Mexican, Egyptian, Jordanian, Australian, Emirati, and Pakistani, to name a few. In a world brewing with conflict over beliefs, ideals, history, ownership, resources, anything really, here is a university that brings together teenagers, young adults, in the hope that in our diversity we find a connection. As human beings, we strive for connections. Our relationships are part of what makes us who we are. How does this idea then apply to cultural heritage? If we strive for connections, what does cultural heritage mean in an increasingly integrated world with a constant movement of people? Heritage is ever-changing because of relationships to place, space, individuals, and communities. It embodies more than a physical object or location. In navigating how heritage can strengthen communal identities, we must not let it be the factor that also creates and exacerbates divides amongst us. On the contrary, heritage exists within our city spaces and within us as citizens. Heritage is the tangible and the intangible, and the Charter of Florence phrases it well when it states that we must recognize the diversity and plurality of our heritage as a source of exchange, innovation, and creativity necessary for spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and material development of humankind. Like identity, heritage is not fixed and it is not exclusive. In some cases, heritage is malleable because it can carry rich and multi-layered narratives. Unfortunately, at times, heritage stands beside nationalism. Rather than heritage contributing to conflict, we should see heritage as being able to aid in fostering dialogue. It is through the understanding of local heritages that we can achieve a sense of resilience. Whether locally or globally, resilience is about embracing diversity in order to build a stronger sense of community. Resilience is about not letting all of the complexities break a sense of self or community, and not letting oversimplification devoid a richer understanding of oneself and of the world. At this point in time, on behalf of my colleagues, I would like to thank the Mayor of Florence and the distinguished guests present here for inviting us to share our experiences at the Unity in Diversity Conference. Each of us are influenced by our global experiences. In order for us to continue our steady progress towards peace, we must first recognize that our philosophies on how to get there will always differ. The value of education lies in allowing us to encounter different perspectives and therefore reflect on our own. This is how education can foster qualities of tolerance and prepare the next generation to confront the global challenges that lie on the horizon. We should teach and expose our children to the bridges that exist between communities and how to walk those bridges. These bridges reveal the beauty in humanity's diversity. When we speak of resilience, we must discuss it in terms of a process, not a result. Resilience is a what, it's not a what, but a how. Yes, it is the capacity to resist, but it's also the process of rebuilding, of recovery, and of community development, so that we may not build walls between us, but join hands and in the face of adversity, stand united in our diversity. Thank you very much.